commission on. Good. Yeah, if you'll take the roll, Director.
All right. Chairman Windrow,
Present.
Vice Chairman Scott,
Present.
Commissioner Ham,
Present.
Commissioner Solomon. No response from Commissioner Solomon. Commissioner Moore,
Here.
Commissioner Green, Commissioner Boatwright,
Here.
Commissioner Cobb, can someone confirm? I thought I saw Commissioner Cobb on. Is he not on as a panelist? And then Commissioner Henry. No response from Commissioner Henry. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
Yeah, they had a couple of house fires last night. He might be asleep. So I believe we have two items to discuss, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Director. FAO certification and minimum number of students for a practical test.
That's correct. In addition to those two items, Commissioner Moore also asked that we add the ERG discussion to the agenda as well, which we have.
All right. Well, we'll just go in order then. We'll start with the FAO. Now, you say there's 659 people that got that was the NIFSAC seal.
Yeah, so the backstory on the FAO is that we had an issue, a question pop up from a firefighter throughout the state that was asked about FAO that required us to dig a little bit more. And as myself and Laura, the accreditation manager, started to dig more, we identified that FAO, that certification is not, essentially it's not an accredited certification. Now, that certification was designed, we all understand the intent was designed to allow firefighters to get PDO and AADO through the completion of that one course. So we continued to dig more, and we identified 658, I believe, certifications that were issued as an FAO certification with an IFSAC seal. However, during that process, we were able to validate that the accredited requirements of PDO and AADO were completed. So all the requirements for PDO and AADO, which are accredited certifications through IFSAC and Pro Board, were completed properly. We reached out to IFSAC to disclose our findings, and basically what we come to is the fears are not as bad as we initially thought. Being that PDO and AADO are accredited, and the skill sheets that are for each of those accredited certifications and the tests that is for those certifications are accredited as well, we really didn't break any rules. So we're not in a situation to where we have 658 firefighters that were basically issued a certification that is no longer valid. It is. However, what they are valid for is PDO and AADO. That's what that certification is. FAO is not an actual certification. What it is a course. And so what I'd like to recommend to the commission is that we keep FAO, we keep the course, but let's issue the certifications for what they are, which are PDO and AADO. Let's stop issuing an FAO certification, which caused all this confusion. And let's issue, when somebody completes FAO and they do all the requirements for the test and the skill sheets for PDO and AADO, whenever they complete that, they will then be issued by the commission a PDO and AADO certification instead of this FAA or FAO certification that we've been doing. With that, we have a couple of different options. We can keep the test as it is, right? The one test. And really nothing changes other than the fact that the piece of paper that folks get at the completion of this certification are the actual certs that FAO covers. Or we can develop two separate tests that both tests incorporate the general requirements. That would be our option that we'd like to go with. No matter which option we go with, that we include the general requirements into those tests. And that would be the additional layer of change. So if we went with that option, they would just take two tests, one for PDO and one for AADO. But throughout the field, this doesn't impact anybody really. They just get, instead of an FAO certification, we can give them an FAO course certificate. And then that certificate would be a prerequisite for PDO and AADO now, which was another thing that kind of led us down this path. Was when we were looking at our prerequisites, the commission does not have FAO listed as a prerequisite for PDO and AADO, which doesn't make sense to me, because that's what that course is. So I think we capture that. We say, hey, we understand, we as a commission recognize that FAO is a prerequisite for PDO and AADO. And then either we keep the one test, we keep the skill sheets, we keep the process the same as it is. And now we issue PDO or AADO or both, or we develop two separate tests and then issue those certifications appropriately as well.
So quick thoughts, since I've been in this the whole time. We already have a standalone PDO test and an AADO test, correct? Those are validated test banks. Because if at TFACA they finish PDO today, they normally take the PDO test on Friday. It doesn't make any sense to maintain that third test bank. Not that it's unaccredited, but it's still got to be maintained. Of course, you may just pull questions from the existing test. How many people recently actually take that test? That's a throwback to 20 years ago, is my question. Is it really necessary anymore? Because it's not a real certification anyway. So there's really, why would we continue to do it? It's just extra work. And it's people that took that test always dreaded the 150 questions.
Yeah.
So let's hear from some of the other commissioners. I'm good with doing away with it. I always thought it was a bit over the top anyways.
So there's a lot of departments across this state that utilize FAO as part of a promotional process to driver, just because it was one of those fast tracks, if you will. I had a choice of doing PDO for 100 questions, AADO for another 100 questions, so that's 200 questions, or I can go ahead and do FAO for 150 questions, which still encompasses the same exact thing. As we know from earlier this year, all policies for the Fire Commission are null and void because they were never ratified in the proper way. So as far as the number of test questions that are associated with any of our tests, that's no longer valid. So if we wanted to go ahead and start doing a 25 question test tomorrow, we're in our right to be able to do that because there's no policy that says otherwise. Because FAO is embedded in so many SOGs for career development across this state, it's something that we have, we talk about all the time, culture and the way we've always done things, and we're trying to be progressive at this point. I feel that still offering that same test of the 150 questions and being able to let me back up, because there are a lot of departments that are teaching in the FAO course, which is embedded with both PDO and AADO. And so, like the director pointed out, no prerequisite mentions FAO because everyone has taught the PDO, AADO component. I'm a FAO holder. I have 5 other people in my department that are FAO holders. And I have the rest of them that actually went the PDO and AADO route. So I think still keeping the test and going back to grading it in the same manner that it was prior to Director Clark, who changed it to a 70 pass of the whole thing and going back and just testing on the individual chapters, because that's where JPRs are embedded. Because they're still doing all of the AADO and PDO skill JPRs to test for FAO. They're still taking a 150 question test that encompasses both PDO and AADO. I just think it's just one of those other avenues that, like I said, is already embedded in all the departments across the state as FAO, and it should still, we should still be able to recognize it, even though it's not a standalone certification, but still be able to offer the PDO and AADO certificates upon passing the FAO testing. That's my thought.
Yeah, and one thing I want to be clear about is, since we were able to validate that the accredited requirements for PDO and AADO were being administered, anybody with an existing FAO certification, we will still recognize that. We still recognize that for PDO and AADO. So there's no issue there with having to go back and reissue PDO or AADO for those folks. I just want to be clear about that.
Corey, I know somebody else chime in. It's a 1-1 right now.
I'm in the same boat with Commissioner Scott. I think that, it's never been a prerequisite. It's just always been the route to where you get AAO or PDO and AAO. That way it's one test. We're not having to administer multiple tests. And as the director said, well, go. Once they complete those checkoffs, then they can issue those certificates. Personally, myself, I think that we need to leave it with the one test versus having to go back and go to two tests or change it to something else that, may be brought up. I'm in agreement with Commissioner Scott.
So practical application, if somebody's at TFACA or Memphis or wherever and they take PDO, do they just skip the test and wait till they finish aerial to go take AADO? I mean, what's the practical application of that? They can't take it without having the training for AADO. It's somewhere. Now they may have gotten it back home on it and done the what is it, about a 19-page checklist to do FAO, all the JPRs. I'm just the practical application. How do they execute it? They go to PDO and they don't take a test?
No. It's still, you have a choice. You're either doing PDO or AADO or doing both. Now, if you're doing PDO, then you're doing the 13 JPRs, I think it is, for PDO. You submit your practical sheet, and then you're testing PDO. Now you have to take the AADO test. So now instead of taking 150 questions, you're taking 100 question PDO, 100 question AADO.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
if they're only in PDO class,
Then they're only testing PDO unless they once again. So 90% of PDO and AADO is being done in-house with in-house practicals. And so those are the practical sheets that we are submitting when these departments are doing it. TFAC is the only one where if you're going to a PDO class, then you're going to a PDO class, and you can go ahead and test at the end of the week if you choose to. But if you test the PDO, then you're testing AADO, and you don't have an option to do FAO.
And a lot of your departments that require the FAO are doing either a 60-hour class or an 80-hour class where they're doing pumps one week as pump driver operator, and then the next week they're doing aerial operator and knocking out both at the same time and trying to get it done that way. I cannot, and Bill, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Memphis Fire does that the exact same way, and they're probably one of our biggest customers when it comes to this because it is in their job requirements as well.
They do. But once again, it's all about options. And so you have an option that if I'm only teaching a PDO class, then I'm only teaching a PDO class, or I'm only testing a PDO. If I'm doing a combined class, which a lot of these guys are doing that do have trucks, and they want their guys to be FAO certified, then they're teaching the combined class. At the end of the class, They're doing the JPRs for all PDO and AADO, and then they're testing FAO at the end of it.
The only other thing is, we've always tried to be careful. We can't control what individual agencies do. And again, Brentwood was an FAO art department. We can't help what policies they set. A lot of people require firefighter 2 within 24 months or 30 months, where we have a 36. So we've got to be careful. We're not in setting policy. We can't let policy dictate what we do. But I don't have. Again, if the test bank is not a problem for the office, then it's not a problem.
You're right. We oversee the accreditation process. We don't make firefighters. We don't make drivers. You're right. But how do we streamline this to make it easier for our firefighters across the state? And if we already have this program set up, and the only hiccup that we have today with this certification is the fact that FAO is not accredited, but PDO and AADO is.
Right. That's what I said.
So I mean, we already have this here. It's already there. So the only hiccup, like I said, is FAO as a standalone is the only thing that's not accredited.
Let me ask a question here, if I could. In our last meeting, we were discussing possibly doing the, I don't remember exactly, the fire setter, the
Youth Fire
program,
Center.
and we were going to make that. We found out we could make that an accredited program. Why can't we make this an accredited program?
Yeah,
Because-
Commissioner Cobb, if I could interject, we have acquired more information on that course that we will discuss at the next commission meeting, but we cannot make that fire setter course a certification for what the requester was intended it to be created for. So I just want to make sure we're not confusing that.
Okay. But
And-
we do have an option too. I mean, there is a way to make a course accredited, correct?
FAO is not a standalone certification. It is not a standalone certification anywhere. The reason why we have been getting by with FAO and basically why we haven't wasted 658 IFSAC sales is due to the fact that at the end of the day, it is done under the umbrella of PDO and AADO, which are standalone certifications.
So when the director and I first talked about this a few weeks ago, one of the things that I proposed to him at that time was if somebody takes the FAO test and passes it, we go ahead and issue them a dual certificate, one for PDO and one for AADO, and then that solves the problem. And then just go ahead and issue an FAO class completion or a Tennessee certification of FAO at the end. That way, the firefighter still has the PDO and AADO certification if they go somewhere else.
Right. So, if I may, to me, the only way FAO makes sense is the fact that you get a dual certification out of it, right? If, like Commissioner Scott was saying earlier, if a department only has a pumper, they don't have an aerial device, then why would they go through an FAO course, right? They would just do PDO, vice versa. So the FAO makes sense, and it allows departments to have a course for folks to get dual certification. But at the end of the day, let's call those certifications what they really are, which is PDO and AADO. Just keep the course, absolutely keep the course. We do everything for certification for those two certifications, but we can't issue a FAO certification because it's not a legal standalone certification. It's a certificate, absolutely. We can give them a certificate that would be recognized by the commission as course completion, but
But if
outside of that,
but if they take
why
an
else would we
FAO
have FAO?
if they take an FAO exam and practical with the written, then we turn around and we issue them a PDO and AADO certificate in exchange.
Correct, because that exam is designed to encompass both of those
Correct.
tests, which meets the whole intent of that course to begin with, is dual certification. But that member is still doing both skill sheets for both of those certifications. They're just taking one combined test, which we have validated we can do based on our capability to be able to grade each of those chapters separately. So if somebody fails, for example, let's just say somebody fails one of those chapters out of the 3 that comprise that test, then they fail the entire exam.
Chapters 4, 5, and 6.
Exactly.
All right, so do you need a motion from us today? Because we don't have a motion on the floor, so we can't even call the question here.
Yes, sir.
'Cause
So we would
we
need a,
can we can go around
we
a
would-
circle on this all day, but I think we just need to vote and move to the next one.
yes, sir. And before you do that, Chairman, another thing that I'd ask the commission to make a decision on is to be able to waive the 30-day requirement for both of those. So right now we have the 30-day requirement before you can progress to 2 different certs. Obviously, it makes sense that we can do those 2 certifications at the same time. I would just ask the commission just to make that official.
No. Hold on a second. It's to level up is the 30-day wait. Meaning I can't take fire 1 today and fire 2 tomorrow. I have to wait 30 days in between those 2. But if I'm on the same level, then there's no
Correct,
wait.
yeah. Correct. Yeah, I got that wrong. Yeah, because they're not prerequisites for each other. That is correct. So please scratch that from the motion. Yep. Thank you.
So the motion would be to continue to offer FAO as a certificate of completion. It can't be accredited because neither accrediting body have that. So the motion is to continue with FAO as a recognized training program. I think is the way we would say that.
I'll make that motion. Commissioner Cobb.
What's the motion?
To continue with FAO
Yes, I
as
second
a
it.
as a recognized training certificate.
Commissioner Cobb, would you mind amending your motion to continue FAO, but then to issue the dual certificates at the end?
Yes, let's amend it that way.
Need a second?
Second. Commissioner Scott.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, so could you amend that motion to also capture whether or not we want to do 1 test or 2 separate tests?
I think if we're going to do it, we're going to do 1 test.
Yes.
But by
And we'll
doing
need-
this 1 test, somebody will still be able to do just PDO if they choose to not have to do both.
Right, that whatever they apply for, the PDOs are always going to be there. It's there today. And AADO standalone. FAO is its own test. If somebody wants to get froggy and take 150 questions.
We're just allowing them to have that option there because it's like we spoke earlier. Some departments don't have a truck and they're not going to push that. But if they do, and that's part of their requirement, then they have that option there to do it.
There you go. Appreciate it.
Director, do a roll call vote. Make sure you unmute.
All right, Chairman Windrow,
No.
Vice Chairman Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Ham,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon, who is not present. I will move to Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Boatright,
Yes.
Commissioner Cobb,
Yes.
and Commissioner Henry is not present. Chairman, you do have the majority of the votes are a yes.
All right. So the next one, I'll just go ahead and start it as a motion so we have the discussion. I would make a motion that we leave it at 6 for practical testing.
Yeah,
I'll
Chairman,
make
if you
that
don't,
motion so we can discuss it.
yeah, Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to provide a little information on that.
Yeah, but I
So,
mean, I'm trying to keep it in proper order. If
mhm.
there's no motion, it's not a discussable item. So right now, is there a second or no? If there's no second, there's no discussion.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
I
Yeah,
made
I
a
missed it
motion that
too.
we,
Cut out
I said,
somewhere.
I made a motion that we keep the practical testing at a minimum of 6. That's the motion.
I second that.
Now we'll discuss, and the only reason I say that, Director, is we've been doing this about 23 years now, and it's the practice of 6. A department like Knowlesville will have trouble getting 10. I don't have enough people. I got to call around and get other. That's my thought. Now, again, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah, so for the commission, I don't care what the number is. I really don't, right? I want us to do what's right by the state firefighters. The problem is right now we do not have a number in writing for written exams. And as I've explained to a couple of the commissioners, the only number we do have in writing references practicals, which is 10. And I'm willing to to I guess justify my decision based on that number that's in rule. However, whenever it comes to paying our proctors to go out and do testing, however, when we do not have a number in writing for written testing, you know, we are placed under scrutiny for being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And I want to make sure that we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And I understand that 6 is what we were doing before. That was an unwritten rule. I don't operate by unwritten rules. So I ask that the commission make a decision on this. Now, I believe my recommendation to the commission would be that we standardize that number for all examinations. If we say it's 6, let's say it's 6 across the board and not have 10 for practicals and then 6 for written. Let's do the same number across the board. Additionally, there is a fill-in and there is support, vocal support from some that we don't have a number at all, that we would disadminister if we have one firefighter that needs to do a test, that we would support it. Back to what I said earlier, I don't care what the number is, but if the commission decides that they want to go with that strategy, then I would just ask that you would make a motion to vote on that. And that would be something that we would capture in a rule update to ensure that the language reads that there is no requirement for any commission testing. So those are a couple of options that I recommend. Now, my preferred option would be that we do quantify a number versus just not going without a number. And I would ask that, hey, that number be standardized for both practical and written testing.
Of course, I'm rusty, but I mean, somewhere, and it may have been just a policy. Through the years, we had 6 because we had to attest to it as the training officer that we would have 6 at the exam site. I don't know where it disappeared. It may have been on the forms at some point, and maybe I'm old and senile. I'll give you that too. But it used to say that because we attested that we were going to have 6 there. Now, the field rep wouldn't show up and somebody was sick and there were 5 people sitting in the room. He never walked away. He or she never walked away from administering that test. But again, somebody else, I say, it used to be in writing. Somewhere it's faded away through the years, I guess.
Yeah, and Chairman, even with us going to 10, I want to be clear about the fact that the commission, or at least the administrative section, is still has policy in place to ensure that if we fall below whatever the established number is, that we're still making all attempts as possible to still support that test by leveraging our coordinators who are state employees that we have a little bit more flexibility with. And the last option is always going to be to cancel the test. And I've been very clear with those expectations to our staff on that. And that's a decision that has to be made by me or by the administrative director. So that's not our first option. There are measures in place to try to prevent that from happening, but I want to ensure that when it comes to paying our proctors to go out and proctor the test, that we're doing it in line with whatever's in written policy and not just some word of mouth policy.
So let's discuss this real quick. Here in West Tennessee, we're lucky if we can get, because the number has always been there, 10, 10, 10. We have so many departments that don't test right now, or they have to wait, they may have to wait 3, 4, 6 weeks before they could actually take a test because one of the other departments have set one up. I think we should actually do away with any minimum and be able to offer testing to any firefighter in the state of Tennessee at any time that a department feels that they need to do a test. Because when a test does pop up, then that's when these other departments that don't have to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours or 3 hours away to go test, they have one that's more locally because I set it up with a minimum number. I have 3 people that need to test. I'm gonna go ahead and put a test event in. Next thing I know, 5 departments that surround me that are within a 30-minute driving distance now are able to drop people in much quicker instead of us trying to get around saying, hey, do you have people to test? Hey, do you have people to test? Let's set up a test event. And like I said, that could be 6 weeks down the road. I think we really should just, if a firefighter in the state of Tennessee needs to do a test and the department wants to set one up, I think we should be able to set it up, and whoever decides to set up or goes ahead and signs up the test in that event, it's there and it's available. I think we need to be more available to our constituents.
Yeah, but that's an impractical application we're also charged to be, as he said, good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. Setting
I
up
agree
a
with
test
that.
for one person and paying a field rep $200 to $300 to go administer one test is not practical. That's insane, actually.
No, you're right there, but that's also where the director has talked that if there's a test event where we only have, maybe 2 people set up, that when it comes time for that cutoff for that testing event, that's when he can get with that regional coordinator and see what their schedule is to be able to deviate from it to be able to support that testing event. We need to be more available to our firefighters in this state to be able to test, because it could come down to a situation where there's a promotional process coming up in 2 or 3 weeks, but there's been no test event here in West Tennessee for the past 6 weeks. In Middle Tennessee, you guys are much fortunate because you have a lot more departments that are in the testing processes that are much more closer together that can go ahead and do this. East Tennessee, you guys are kind of in the same boat that we are, where you may have one test event every 6 weeks. So, and it's because we're not available to our firefighters.
Yeah, Commissioner Scott, one thing, and while I will ensure that the administrative staff will do everything possible to support whatever the decision is. I do see that being issues though, if we go without a quantified number. And if we have multiple departments that are now all of a sudden that are scheduling testing events based on having one person that needs to test, we're going to run out of bandwidth when it comes to personnel that can support those tests. And so that is a fear that I think needs to be spoken to this commission if we do go that route.
And think long term. This is temporary. I would like to think sometime in the next 4 years we'll be at CBD or CBT, computer-based testing, and it won't be as much of an issue if we're using the TCATs, if we're using whatever. This is temporary, and again, there's other commissioners on. Let's get some feedback.
I was thinking the same thing you were, Chairman, that we got computer testing coming up. What does that look like? Will we be able to test one individual with that testing, or will we have to continue to have multiple people for that testing?
So I can speak on that, Chairman, if you like.
Yes, sir.
So we are in the process of right now, we have a plan to go to online testing, and our goal is to do this by the end of the year. Currently, our process that we are looking at will encompass the use of iPads. And the only difference to the field will be instead of a proctor giving them a written test, they will hand them an iPad. But we still have the same limitations when it comes to the number of folks who can test. It'll be one proctor per 25 students. Remember, we have to maintain a proper uh, student to proctor ratio to allow the proctor to effectively proctor these exams. And so there's other factors that come into play. While yes, now we're going to have the capability to administer tests online and provide an instant score result to the firefighter, we still have other factors that come into play on how many students we can administer these tests to. While it simplifies the process, I would still say, hey, we still come back to the previous point that I made with the fact that yes, we have to be good stewards of government funds, but we also have to ensure that we have enough proctors within the section to be able to administer tests at these testing events. If we get rid of a number, right? If we get rid of a number and we just say, hey, if you got one person needs to be tested, we'll do it. Then there's going to require some deconfliction up front to ensure that, hey, those proctors can effectively cover that span of test events within whatever period of time that is.
So I've been very vocal about this from the get-go, and me and the directors had several comments back and forth with each other. I'm all about taking care of our firefighters, and I understand that we've got to be good stewards of our money. I get that 100%. I have a budget that I have to stay within my training division. I have a budget that I have to stay in when I do other things. I try to host tests every single month at Martin Fire, whether I have anybody signed up or not. But I look at practical events trying to require it to be 10. I may not have 10 people trying a practical event in 3 years. And that kind of goes back to what Commissioner Scott's saying. That number is way too high right off. And I wasn't there on the commission when that was created. I don't know the reasoning behind that. I'm not saying that it should be the wild, wild west where we just allow one test, one practical, whatever. But I'm perfectly good with, I think it needs to be a 3-person minimum for a written. And I think it needs to be a 3-person minimum for a practical. And if you don't have those numbers, it's like the director and myself have talked about before back and forth through email, is that we need to try to work out with a contractor, but not contractor, but one of our coordinators in each grand division to see if they can make that still happen. Because if we cancel a test, it could be the end of their career. It could be the end of or start of disciplinary actions. And yes, I know that's on them but we at the end of the day are still customer driven, and they are still our customers that we're supposed to help and take care of. I personally, I think it needs to be moved to 3 and 3. That's just my personal opinion. And then, like I said, to reiterate, work with a coordinator if you've got less than 3 in an event. But the cancellation needs to be an absolute last stake. And you know, if I get a test canceled in Martin because nobody signed up, that's fine. But I'm going to put tests out there every month for people because we are in West Tennessee and we do have very few people that participate in the program. So I may have a lot of volunteers. My test event may be all volunteer career at all. And that's another thing that we've got to remember is we're not just a career-driven society anymore when it comes to testing. We're both a volunteer as well that are trying to get these certifications, trying to make their departments better, make their self better. We've got to be able to work for them. And I know at the end of the day, it comes down to the bottom line of the dollar, but we've got to do something that's going to help our customers out and be customer friendly at the same time.
Any other thoughts?
I agree with Commissioner Green.
And I was just going to share that we do have this portion of that rule open. So if we want to vote to do that in the EI or the accreditation side package, I've got that rule open so we can get that moving.
Mary Beth, when's that got to be completed by?
This one is the you remember we split the packages. We've got the EIP rulemaking hearing scheduled for May 5th or 6th, whenever we agreed to do it. That's already filed with the Secretary of State, ready to go. This one I'd like to file as soon as my edits are done through the internal side, and this meeting should give me all the answers I need to get that going.
So if we may, let me ask, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. If we do something on Monday, then would that be moved to the meeting in Gatlinburg to where we could add that into the package? Is that what you're saying? Do I understand you correctly?
No, sir. The second half of the rulemaking that we split, which would include the accreditation changes. So that one is yet to be filed with the Secretary of State, just pending the FAO discussion. But the EIP and Chapter 6 consolidation of the NFPAs is pending a rulemaking hearing. So those edits are closed, except for what happens at the rulemaking hearing. But the second half is still open, ready for internal edits and filing as soon as you guys are done with it.
And what I will say, Commissioner Green, to go along with what you're asking, I'd be willing to have a discussion with Assistant Commissioner Bell and our legal team. And if the commission was to vote on a lower number today, and we have that in writing in the official meeting minutes, and if they concur, then I'd be willing to say, yeah, let's implement what the new number is. But that would have to be a discussion that we would have to have internal to make sure that we can legally do that.
What's the motion on the floor right now?
6, a minimum of 6. Now, think of the vacuum. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. I think we have other rules or other requirements to host a practical. You have to be able to host the practical. Now, think about the implication if you want to do a firefighter 1 practical at, I don't know what department, you've got to have normally 6 to 7 people there. Let's say one of them's a hose line evolution. You have to have a safety margin. Normally, the host department's providing those bodies. Normally, now a lot of people have agreements with each other in regions that, hey, if you're sending somebody for a practical, you got to send me an evaluator that's authorized.
Well, in rule, for every 2 that you send, you have to send a proctor with.
Right.
That's in
So
rule.
if you're trying to host it by yourself on a Saturday morning, I'm thinking through what the negative outcome. Our paid employee shows up, but there's nobody there to assist them. Now, again, I know that's a worst case scenario, but I heard it took 5 tones this past Saturday morning to get enough people to make a call, to get 2 people on a call for a big volunteer system.
Chairman, I think you're confusing something though. When these firefighters are coming to do their practical testing, they're set off in a room by themselves. They're not on that floor. So it's up to that host department to begin with. If they don't have the personnel to host it, then they shouldn't be hosting it. And that's a whole different discussion. The discussion we're on right now is what is the number that we're looking at for minimum testing. Now, as far as logistics for that department, that's on them. We want to know what number is suitable for everybody.
Yeah. And again, I'm in the camp. You've got to have some minimum. It could turn into the Wild Wild West, and maybe it wouldn't. It's just 41 years of watching firefighters. I could see the Wild Wild West. And again, 6 was always the number. I'd never heard 10. Of course, I haven't been a training officer since 2011, so it could have faded rode off into the sunset. I just think we're a responsible body appointed by the governor to execute a reasonable standard. I'm sure Post and EMS have a set number. They're not out doing. Of course, I don't know about a Post practical, and there is a practical for EMS. Obviously, your skills checkoffs.
If I may, I'm going to put my 2 cents in for what it's worth. I tend to kind of agree with the chairman and the director. I think we need to have some kind of standard number. I don't know exactly what that number is, but I think that no number leaves it very open ended for a number of things. I mean, that you could have, not to say that you would, but you may have test proctors like, hey, schedule this. I mean, they'll be scheduling tests every week, multiple times a week. Just, I mean, because they're getting paid whether one or none show up in that case. But I do think there needs to be a number, just kind of back to what the director said, to be good stewards of what of what's before us. So I don't.
And to move this and to move, Chris, and you've got to be careful because there are two different events. Practical exams will never be computer based, so those are exams we'll have to administer. The written tests, we hope, in a dream world, it would go to the TCATs that are all over the state, and you could just sign up and go schedule a time with online with that facility and go take the test because it's already a secure facility. But we're not there yet. I mean, I could amend my motion down to 3 if that would move us along.
Let's pause real quick. One of the avenues that Greg Palmer was moving towards was in-house practicals to begin with. And so the in-house evaluators, where we may not even have to do a practical testing event at any department because their JPRs are already being checked off by that in-house evaluator. And all we're doing now is the written test or the computer-based test. So let's think about this. Let's think about the progression piece here before we go ahead and do this, because if we do the in-house evaluator, then there's no need for this discussion anymore, because as far as the discussion for written is still one thing, but for the practical portion, if we're doing those in-house, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, so the in-house, I'm a huge chief, or Commissioner Scott, as you've heard me say, I'm a huge proponent of us getting to that point. However, that's going to take time, right? And naturally, I think that our biggest issue with the in-house practical events is that we have got to develop skill sheets that are hands-on based. A lot of our skill sheets now for some of our certifications are project based, and we need to go exclusively hands-on. The problem that we have is that as a commission, remember, we worry about the certification. We don't really deal with the training aspect of it. And so we have to create in a certification process, skills evaluation sheets that provide the information needed for that in-house evaluator, that lead instructor, to develop curriculum that meets all the JPR requirements to fully mirror the evaluation process, if that makes sense. Naturally, I think our best course of action to do that is as NFPA editions change, then that will be a natural time for us because we're already having to go in and correlate the skills and do all that. That would be a natural time for us to expand those skill sheets, to get away from the project evaluations to hands-on practical skill evaluations.
Well, we're there now with 1010. And so when we really look at this, we're looking at HMA, HMO, Fire 1, Fire 2 skilled practical. That's the practical test that we're talking about here. All right. So if we move that in-house, because the JPR checkoff sheets are already there, and if they're being signed off while they're doing these classes or what have you, then it's just a matter of ACADIS being able to handle more than 8 meg uploads.
Yeah, but what I'll use Fire Officer 1 as an example. Fire Officer 1 is it's a project. That should be all hands-on practical evaluation, in my opinion. And I fully intend, whenever we get to that point, that we're redoing that we're transitioning to all hands-on skills evaluation, to allow a department to then take that and develop a curriculum in-house that trains that firefighter to be able to effectively pass the evaluation that we've set forth.
Right. So, but that's something that is in the future that we can come to. But right now, when we talk about a practical testing event today, we're doing HMA, HMO, Fire 1, Fire 2. That's it.
Mhm.
The skill sheet's already there. Why are we not going ahead and moving towards that in-house proctor today? We can do that.
Absolutely. That's a decision by the commission.
And so with that being said, then, as far as a minimum for a practical, that has no bearing at this point because it's only those 4. And if it's being taken care of in-house, now all we have to do is worry about the written portion. And what does that look like? And if we're going to go ahead, and I think with our discussion you and I had on Friday, iPads have already been bought. And now it's a matter of Acatus working through to get that the online testing portion done. What's that magic number for us to have a proctor or a coordinator to come out and do a host that test? Is it 3? Is it 5? I think 5 would be a reasonable number at that point for a written test. Because
Remember,
Go on.
span of control is 3 to 7, 5 being ideal, right? So I like 5 as well. That's a good number. So, and we all
And I'll
understand
amend
that.
my,
Yeah.
I will amend my motion to 5 then. That's the motion that's on the floor. I would say we have a minimum of 5 to schedule the written tests. And I mean, you got to say practical right now, but we know that'll fade.
Yeah, and Chairman, one thing I want to be clear about with terminology, when we talk about the practical evaluations. So our proctors, even now, when we come out and we proctor practical events, the departments are responsible for providing personnel to serve as evaluators, not proctors. Those are 2 different terms, especially in the accreditation world. So I just want to make sure that we're being clear about terminology when we say those 2 words.
And again, I can amend to 5. I don't know who seconded my original motion. I would need that second.
I'll second the 5.
Sure.
All right. Any further discussion? We have one more item to get to.
So here's my thing is I'm good with 5, but we still need to make sure that we are doing everything we can. And we need to make sure that we still have people testing. We do the cancellation, and I know, Director, you said this is your last avenue as well, but I'm just reiterating this. Cancellation has to be our last resort when it comes to testing for people on written. But I am good. I'm okay with changing it to 5, but we've got to make sure that cancellation is the last route that we do.
Yeah,
Now-
Commissioner Green, I can assure you that it is in our internal policy that it is the last route, and it is to be evaluated by myself or the administrative director before that decision is made.
And we got to remember, because I have done it, and I know some of y'all have. If that day the field rep or the proctor's sick, one of us might be asked to go. And I know that's a short ask, but don't forget, we can be that representative to administer that test. It's not my favorite thing to do, but I have gone, again, to keep the test from getting canceled, it might be on one of us. Don't lose sight of that.
Yep, and that's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I keep the slides ready in case I have to go do one. All right, any other further discussion? The number is at 5 that we'd be voting on.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to say I apologize for not being here early. We had 2 back-to-back structure fires in Franklin last night, but
I
I
told him
just
you were
kind of got,
asleep.
yeah, I just got in. Yeah, thank you, sir. I just got into the tail end of this conversation, but I think I also looked up the EMS side, and I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but the EMS side and the police side require 25 students for each of those for a proctor.
Yeah, so
of
we're not going to go there.
That is not practical for a volunteer department.
No.
No, and Stephanie, I agree 100%. That's why I totally agree with this number 5. I've been listening to the conversation. I think that that's a good number. So I just wanted to say good morning and apologize for being late.
I know. I told him you were out saving lives and protecting property last night. He even called Brentwood to go play with you.
Yes, we
Um,
did.
All right, Director, take a roll call vote, or take a roll call vote.
Yeah, copy that. Please, just want the record to show that Commissioner Henry is not present for this. All right, Chairman Windrow,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Ham,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon is not present. Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Boatright,
Yes.
Commissioner Cobb,
Yes.
and Commissioner Henry.
Yes.
All right, Chairman, the vote is unanimous, yes.
All right. It gives you direction in the office. All right. Last item was ERG and I guess in HMA testing or HMO. I want clarity there.
Can we pause real quick just to go back to this last conversation that we just voted on? How quick do you think we can move towards in-house practical evaluators?
For those tests for HMA, HMO, firefighter 1, firefighter 2, everything's already set up for them to do it. I mean, that's just an approval by you as the commission to say you're okay with that.
Well, then I make a motion that we move this in-house and allow the departments to go ahead and do practical HMA, HMO, firefighter 1, firefighter 2 in-house practicals moving forward.
All right, Mary Beth, my only problem, this was not on the published agenda. Can it be introduced? But that's a Mary
Yeah.
Beth question.
Yes, sir. Y'all would just need to make a motion to add that to the agenda and go through the motions there.
So let me strike my first motion. I make a motion that we add this to the agenda for today to add in-house practical evaluators to departments for HMA, HMO, firefighter 1, firefighter 2.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Is there any chance, we're already doing all the others in-house. What's the audit trail for that? What is the accountability trail? I guess I'm asking. I know I'm old and cynical. I'm asking the question. I can see if there's no fire commission oversight, what does that look like?
So Chairman, what will happen is those certifications will fall in line with our established policy to where we will require a 2-week notification anytime practicals for those certifications are being conducted in-house. That allows us the opportunity to come out and evaluate those practicals if we so choose. Now, when it comes to the training aspect of it, the commission, the only oversight that I can think of is you would have to go back to what we've been doing, which is the course approval process to allow folks to do that in-house. But if the commission votes and says that, hey, we agree that those should just be blanket policy in regards to being done in-house, then I think the only commission oversight is just the notification process and us being able to get out and evaluate them as we can.
And it's still, the instructor cannot be the evaluator. I mean, that stands anyways.
Correct. Yep. And as we've transitioned to and holding the line on what was in rule regarding that, we've actually recognized that it was good that we did that because there were a lot of folks from departments that didn't understand the instructor/evaluator requirement. So this has served to be beneficial. And those requirements will still stand, but instead of now requiring them to submit a course approval, they have blanket clearance to do those in-house. They just got to provide us the notification. And without that notification, that 2-week notification to the commission, to us in advance, we're not going to process that certification.
And to be clear on that as well is when the in-house practicals for these skills, when the in-house practical skills take place, they have to sign off on every JPR that's associated with that level of certification, just like PDO and AADO. They can't, like right now, if they go to a testing event, they may pull one HMA and two HMO. No, they have to sign off on all JPRs as that's what's required per the accreditation.
So if one of you's teaching a 240 hour, 100 hour, 300 hour recruit class, it's much easier to do the skills as you do the chapter. Let's say this week
Correct.
is lab. How would the commission feel? Let's just say Memphis Fire would have to submit 19 practical dates for us to be able to come back, because you're going to do the practical as you do the skill during the course. You're not going to wait till the end to do that. So are we going to accept 19 practical dates for every Friday during the, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, because this is how I do it. If I'm the training officer, I would do those JPRs, if not at the end of each chapter, at the end of each week. So I wouldn't have to have a big mass at the end. How do we handle that?
Correct. Yeah. So we will accept those type of notifications because we understand. I understand the dynamics that go on within the departments, right? And I get that. And let me be clear, just because the notification is required to us, right? That does not mean that somebody that you cannot perform
No, I
that
understand.
practical without somebody from the commission being there to watch it. There's no way we could get to every practical in this state. We don't have the robust staff to be able to do that. But we require that notification to allow us the opportunity if we can. What we're doing here, if we do this, right, what we're doing here is that the commission is affording a certain amount of trust to the departments. They're allowing, and remember, we have an attestation requirement from each of those, for each of those certifications that the fire chief and or training officer is going to sign, attesting to the fact that 100% of the JPRs were instructed to for that discipline. But the commission is putting their trust in those departments to provide instructors and evaluators that are certified and qualified to do those certifications in-house. And then on our side, we're going to make sure that the proper skills were evaluated, that the paperwork was completed, the prerequisites were met. And if all that is checked off, then we're going to process the certification.
All right.
my
So we
question
had
I
a,
guess, is,
go ahead, Corey.
so attestation form director. So if we have a department volunteer or whoever that doesn't have anybody certified as an instructor, if they fill that form out, they're saying that they got somebody that was instructor one certified or whatever, however it needs to be worded, that they got that and they were there to check those people off. I guess what I'm getting to is we just can't have this department saying, okay, yeah, we did firefighter one and check them off without having somebody that's at least at that level, I guess is my question.
That's correct, Commissioner Green. That's the intent of the attestation form. Now, I can't sit here and guarantee that somebody might not try to game the system, but I can tell you if that comes to light and we find it, that would be something that I bring to the commission's attention immediately for you all to take action against.
And let me ask you this, and this may put more work on you guys, and I don't want to put more than what we're already doing, but is that not something where I'm just asking, could we require them when they send their form in to also give you a copy of, say, the instructor one certificate or whoever it is going to be, just so that way it's on record? So it doesn't, I understand what you're saying. You may have some departments that circumvent the wheel and say they're doing it, but not really doing it. I guess I'm just trying to keep us out of the hot water on both sides.
But what we could require is that the evaluator, and it may be on the form, I don't have it in front of me, but we can definitely ensure that that attestation form has a spot for the evaluator's information. And then we can look up that evaluator's information in ACADIS to make sure that they have the prerequisites, the certifications required to be an evaluator for that certification.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I know because like with the ACI program that TPACA has, I know it's on their, they do their class requests. It says who's going to be the instructor, what's their instructor number level, and then that information can be checked if needed. But I just wondered if we could do the same thing.
So for technical, we had a motion to add this to the agenda. Did we actually technically have the motion to do this? I lost track.
So I withdrew the first motion that I had to go ahead and add this to the agenda. So that's where we're at
Right.
now in discussion. So we need to vote on adding this to the agenda?
I think we did vote on that, didn't we?
No.
Oh, we didn't vote. I'm sorry.
No, we
went
did
into
not.
the discussion rabbit hole.
Okay,
And a
everybody,
second on the agenda we did.
everybody in favor of this being on the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. I believe the ayes have it. So now we'll need a motion to actually vote on.
So now I make a motion that we go ahead and allow in-house evaluators for HMA, HMO, firefighter 1, firefighter 2 to be able to check off in-house, provided that they are certified to that level of training, or they're accredited to that level of training.
I second
Commissioner
that.
Scott.
Corey seconded.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I was just going to say, Commissioner Scott, would you, we were talking about a person and you want to put in your motion to have the evaluator's name and PSID number added to that form if it's not there?
I think that's going to be an in-house with the director that he's adding that.
Okay.
Yeah, administratively, we can make sure those attestation forms get updated properly to reflect what the commission wants.
Thank you, Director.
And so I've got one question, and Director, I don't know if this is for you or for Ms. Laura, but by us doing this and having the attestation form signed and sent in, do we still meet our requirements for accreditation with Pro Board and IFSAC the way we're going to do this?
Yes, yes, and this is very common to do.
Okay, I thought that was right because of the previous conversations with the previous accreditation manager, but we really never dove really deep off into that. I just wanted to make sure from my readings, I'm in agreement. I think we do have that ability. I just wanted to make sure that we are meeting those requirements for them as well.
And this will not abolish if a department still needs our, let's say it's a small department that the instructor taught the class and they're the only FDI one in the department. They're going to need an outsider, which might be the commission. We're not abolishing that ability. If you
Not at all.
call, if you write in and say, I need a field rep to come administer firefighter 1 practical, they can still do that because some may not have 2 instructors.
Check.
You know, the
That's right.
instructor might have taught the whole class. Now they can't evaluate it.
No, this just opens up another avenue to be able to do that, which also will be a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars because we're not paying a proctor to go out there to do an evaluation when they could.
Right, in Memphis that has 40 instructors. Yeah.
And it
That's
will
what
also ensure that they do the 2-week rule, or we can kick it back per the direct, and then they're stuck resubmitting it.
That's right. Yeah, and this makes it easier because now you don't have somebody at Memphis Fire for 2 to 3 days trying to do practicals, or maybe Nashville Fire, or some of these larger departments. It allows them to do that. Like Woodruff said, it allows them to utilize their instructors. I mean, we've got to be. I mean, we all get instructors in our department, so that way we're doing everything correctly. I mean, I've got a list of 10 to 15 that I can put in that place, and that's what we've got to allow these departments to do is utilize their people correctly.
All right. I'll call the question here. Director, take the roll call.
All right, Chairman Windrow,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Ham,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon is not present. Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Boatright,
Yes.
Commissioner Cobb,
Yes.
and Commissioner Henry.
Yes, sir.
All right, it's unanimous.
Covering more ground in this special
Now,
meeting we had to do in a real
I have
meeting.
a quick question.
Mhm.
Commissioner Winder, I have a quick question. Just in some of the
Yes,
side
sir.
notes in the chat line, I see that there's some questions about that. Like there was one on here um, that said, looking at the practical sheets, there's no place for an evaluator to sign off on the skill. And then somebody said that the current requirement for firefighter 2 is not fire department instructor 1. Um, Director Barlow, how does that, like, is
Yeah,
that something in-house you all can put on there to require that without us?
so Commissioner Henry, I'd like to wait until public comments to address that if we could. And however, and yeah,
Thank you. I'm sorry, sir.
All right, final item, ERG, and I take it this is during a testing event for HMA or HMO, provide some clarity, Director.
yep. So I don't believe this doesn't require a vote from the commission. All right. So this was requested that I speak about this just to provide some clarity. And I'd like to explain the reason why we removed that. So the ERG, our HMA and HMO test is derived exclusively from the textbook. There are no questions that come from the ERG. However, we all know that in a 3-hour testing event, somebody can sit there and research the ERG and get them close in the right direction to be able to pass. And what this originated from was from somebody who requested or who challenged a question that quoted the ERG word for word. So I started asking questions and I knew right away that there's no way somebody could quote that ERG without having it right in front of them. So I asked why. And some of the backstory I got was the reason why we rewrote those tests was to steer folks away from the ERG. That's the reason why it's exclusively out of the textbook. Not to mention, the ERG is for field use. I'm not saying that folks can't use it for HMA and HMO. They can use it during the practical portion. But why don't we allow the IPRG during wildland testing? Why don't we allow NFPA codes during fire inspector testing? Those references overlap with the textbook as well. We are enabling folks to what I believe is cheat. And what we saw after since we implemented that is that we had a TFACA testing event where we had 6 students back out of testing for HMA and HMO because they couldn't use the ERG. When they were informed they couldn't use the ERG, they backed out. What does that tell me? It tells me people are not studying. That's what it tells me. We also had an issue with an academy up in Northeast Tennessee where we had a failure there as well for an academy where traditionally the folks who passed HMA and HMO were somewhere close to 100%. Now the fail rate across the board is, we know that HMA and HMO are traditionally our hardest certifications, our hardest tests based on the very nature of those certifications. So what this is designed to do is designed to force people to study. That's what it's designed to do. And as I've said multiple times, my certification or my name is placed on every certification that we issue through the state. And that means something to me. And I want competent firefighters whenever they get these certifications. So that's what it boils down to. There's no requirement from an accreditation standpoint that says we have to let them use the ERG. None of our test questions are even designed to prompt the student to use the ERG. I'll tell you that there are some states that allow it. And when we spoke to them, they have test questions that are directly designed to prompt a student to pull out the SOG or an ERG. And even then, that person has to turn in the ERG back to the proctor once they answer that question. The ERG is for field use. And like I said, we don't allow the IPRG for wildland. We don't allow NFPA codes for fire inspector when folks are tested. So that's the reason. And I think at the end of the day, it maintains the integrity of the certification process.
Yeah, I mean, we call we have hearings for anybody else that carries a document into a testing event. Uh, I mean, over at Copy Solutions in Brentwood, we used to keep all 1,800 test questions for firefighter one in a study guide. You could go buy it. Now, that got carried away. There was a fire department that took that into a testing event. Obviously, we took their cert away. I don't. It's not. It's not our nature to have open book written tests. It's inconsistent to. And again, I would be concerned if any of the questions came from the ERG, but there are no questions. They're all derived from Jones and Bartlett. Any
That's
other
correct.
other thoughts?
I don't have thoughts on the ERG. I agree that, it creates an open book test, and there's no other test that we offer that's open book. I do have an issue with the dictionary piece though, because I know the dictionary's being pulled or has been pulled. I still think that the dictionary should be available as a reference piece. That's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, and Commissioner Scott, I'm not saying folks can use the dictionary, but it has to be through an approved accommodation request. The reasoning behind this is that our tests are written to a basic reading comprehension level. They're not written for somebody that's trying to get, become a medical doctor or get their PhD. They're written to a basic reading comprehension level. And I think we're selling our firefighters short by allowing them to use a dictionary. Now, if somebody has a legitimate accommodation request, that accommodation request comes to us and we evaluate it, and part of that approval is that we let them use a dictionary, then we will allow it, absolutely. And I'll address the calculators as well. The only certification that I can imagine that we would allow somebody to use a calculator would be PDO. And we all know that PDO, the friction loss and the fire ground hydraulic methods that are taught to students are designed to allow a driver to implement those methods on the fire ground. I have never in my career saw a driver pause charging a hand line because they needed to grab a calculator to do friction loss. We're enabling them to not learn those methods. Those methods are designed for them to use on the fire ground during a split-second notice. We need to hold the high standard. And you guys have all heard me talk about it. I'm big on standards, but we need to hold the line when it comes to standards. And we need to produce competent firefighters that are learning the methods and the principles that are in these textbooks that our department instructors are teaching to be able to use on the fire ground, and not give them an avenue to I guess, skirt those methods and degrade their comprehension when it comes to implementing them.
And
I
again, this is
disagree. I, sorry, go ahead.
no. Go ahead. It's a discussion because this isn't
The
a voting
calculator,
item.
I don't mind. I get that, understand, but the dictionary I disagree with. Even I can read to a very confident level. I mean, I've got a bachelor's and working on a master's. I know how to read, but there's certain words in these tests that the dictionary may jog a firefighter's memory. There's nothing that says in rule that we can't use the dictionary or anything along those lines. Personally, myself, I think the dictionary needs to be there at the table. If somebody needs to look up a word because they're unsure of the meaning of it or not unsure exactly what it's talking about, I think they should have that ability. That's my 2 cents. I mean, nobody else may agree with me, but I think you're doing a disjustice to the firefighter when you take it completely away or you make them put in a request to be able to use it.
Yeah, and Commissioner Green, I understand that. And like you said, it's not a rule. And I believe this falls within our administrative, me as the administrative chief for the firefighter commission, to do what we feel is in line with the best practice for maintaining it, certification process that's of high integrity, of high standards. And I'm not going to, this decision, there's many folks that agree with me. There's many folks that disagree with me, but unless we can produce a valid reason why, some type of data or something that shows that firefighters need a dictionary for tests that are written to what I believe to be a basic comprehension level. And if we need to go back and re-look at those test questions and make sure we absolutely will. We don't want to, we're not looking to stump anybody by using big words, right? All these words come for the most part, all these testings come pretty much word for word out of the textbook. So, they're afforded an opportunity while they're studying, if they don't understand a word, to look it up then. I just don't understand why we would allow it during an official testing environment.
Yeah. And I can't remember any other, since I've taken post and EMS, I don't ever remember anyone else allowing. I know DOD doesn't. And I can't remember how many times people actually.
I'll say this to the commission, the goal should not be to produce more firefighters. It should be to produce competent firefighters. I think we all agree with that. And if the difference between firefighters passing a test is because they didn't have a dictionary to look up one or two words, then I would argue that they probably weren't competent to begin with. Now, and I want to take away from a legitimate accommodation request. If there's a legitimate accommodation request, we will absolutely evaluate it. And if substantiated, we will support it.
I've got a couple comments. I tend to agree with Commissioner Bell that I'm not a big proponent of taking away the dictionary. I believe with the director, agree with the director that we should have high standards. But also don't believe a dictionary has probably helped anybody pass or fail a test. Maybe if they were on the bubble, one or two questions possibly. I'm going to go back to a test question that I had and used a dictionary. The test question referred to something being adjacent to, okay? Adjacent to, that could be interpreted several different ways: across the street, beside the house, a couple of different things like that. And that was just one instance that I remember, in the years of testing that I did refer to a dictionary. Did that help me pass the test or fail the test? Probably not. Do I think that a dictionary is going to help someone pass or fail a test? Probably not. I mean, if they're going to make a 30, they're going to make a 30 with a dictionary, without a dictionary. But I do know, there's many tests. I hear, as training officer, I hear many people, I made a 69, I made a 67, those tests that they're real close. On instances like that, could it help? Yeah, possibly. So I don't know. I would probably be a proponent of keeping the dictionaries, calculator. Yes, I agree that if you can't do simple math, and that's kind of what we're in most of the test questions when we're talking to friction loss. We use rounded numbers, so I think the the calculators is, that I agree with that. But I do want to speak to the ERGs in the HMA, and just because I had a longtime friend, chief, I actually worked for TFACA for a long time. He called me about taking the ERGs out of the testing process for HMA and changing the test so that the test did not primarily come out of the ERG. He was pretty upset. He's now a trained officer at a volunteer department, and I could say his name and probably everybody would know him, but he was very upset that that was not being used anymore. He said that kind of spoke to the point of the whole purpose of HMA. Is really should be, and at that level, it is knowing how to identify and isolate, and that's what we use the ERG for. And if we're not teaching in the HMA, which I know we still are teaching in the HMA to how to use the ERG, but if that's kind of what we're expecting of people at the HMA level, then why are we why would we not continue to test using that ERG, allowing them to use that ERG? Because the biggest majority of our people are volunteers. And, that may be where they end, is it at HMA, HMO level, and, they're not going to be going operationally with any hazmat incident, but we do want them to be able to identify primarily. So I tend to kind of lean towards allowing the ERG and our test being, kind of focused around the ERG and that HMA level. And I just spoke with another training officer yesterday that, the last several years, this HMA, HMO has kind of been, changed a number of different times. I'm not going to say the test so much, but kind of how we test. And he made the comment to me that, about the time as a training officer, you kind of get the feel of, what some of these tests, and we shouldn't necessarily be teaching to pass a test. I mean, we should be teaching our firefighters how to operate, how to, function in the field. But I've talked to some of the, the training officers that say, we're just trying to figure out what they're looking for in these tests. We went from the HMO being one of the most failed tests that the commission has to now I think HMA is probably getting up there with that. And training officers are kind of having a difficult time knowing, kind of how to teach this and how to be able to give their firefighters the best possibility of passing these tests. So just kind of my 2 cents.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The ERG is still used in the practical. We're only talking about the written test.
That's correct. The ERG is still to be used in the practical around what it was designed to be used for, was in the field.
Practical skill. Okay.
Yep.
So,
It is, but in the
go ahead, Brent.
I was just going to say at the HMA level, as far as the ERG being used in the practical, primarily, a lot of times the ERG or an HMA practical or HMO practical, maybe, donning and doffing equipment. You don't really need the ERG for, a lot of the skills that you're actually drawing for HMA, especially. I'm not saying all of them, but, I still think that really encouraging and testing these people to be able to really dive off into the ERG is probably better for everybody. So.
Commissioner Ham, if you don't mind, I'd like to address that. So the ERG, so when you talk about allowing departments to teach their folks, that's incumbent upon the departments to make sure that they are providing instructors who are knowledgeable to develop a curriculum that adequately prepares their firefighters to pass these tests. And what we have seen is that, there are HMA courses going on around the state that folks are teaching HMA in 4 hours. And you can't tell me that having the ERG as a crutch didn't play a factor into that. The ERG, that the test is to test cognitive ability, right? Of the principles that you discussed, right? When it comes to HMA and HMO, it's not to test folks on how to look through an ERG. The ERG is designed to be user friendly for firefighters. They get to practice with it during practical events. And it's designed because the industry understands that everything involved in hazmat as a whole is very expansive in nature, right? And it's an incident that is significant enough that you need a reference point to ensure that you're establishing cordons appropriately, you're identifying materials appropriately, and there are plenty of avenues and plenty of periods within the instruction and certification process to still allow folks to get accustomed to using an ERG. I just don't believe it should be during a test. It shouldn't be during an open book test. And I'm willing to go on the limb here and say that I'd love to reevaluate our numbers in 6 months to see what the pass fail rate is for HMA and HMO. Because now folks are forced to go in and study the book that the test comes out of. There's not one question on that test that is from anywhere else other than that book. And folks have not been forced to go in and actually study. They've been using the ERG as a crutch.
So
I
I have
disagree.
not seen the test.
Go ahead.
I have not seen the HMA test. I guess my concern would be is how much of that test or is about using the ERG, because if we don't put a large amount of focus on using that ERG at that awareness level, then I think that we're kind of, if the firefighters aren't required to really dig into that ERG, they're not going to use it. They're not going to familiarize themselves. They're going to familiarize themselves with what they got to have to pass that test. And if I would say that if the test is a majority of how to use the ERG, knowing the ERG, that type of thing, but just not able to use it, and as opposed, for instance, what is the green section? Maybe that's a test question. Okay, well, I kind of go either way of using the ERG or not using the ERG. But, again, I have not seen the HMA test, so I can't speak to that.
Yeah, and I appreciate
One
the
thing
comments.
that I would,
I appreciate the comments. I just want to say this. I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate, there's folks that I've talked to that agree with me, and there's probably more folks that I've talked to that disagree with me on this. But I think they all walk away understanding, the reasoning behind it. And it's not just us shooting from the hips. There's, this is a legitimate reason behind it. It's to maintain standards, right? And I've thought about this from all angles. And I can tell you, as a young firefighter, I was able to complete HMA, HMO, hazmat tech, hazmat incident commander, and I wasn't allowed to use ERG during any of those tests, right? And folks are very capable to do so. We create legitimate tests that are from a textbook that we tell you which textbook it's from, but we can't do the studying for folks. At what point do we draw the line when it comes to accountability and stop holding people's hands, stop coddling folks, give them the resources needed, right? Put a certain amount of trust in the departments to provide instructors to be able to train and instruct folks, and then give them a legitimate test that, no crap, test the cognitive ability for that discipline. And this is where I feel like we had to draw the line. And I hope that in 6 months we see an increase in pass rates. I really do. But at the end of the day, HMA, even with the use of the ERG on those tests, there was still a high failure rate throughout the state. And I would think it's part of that is due to the reason that folks just solely thought that they could go in there and just not study and just use the ERG to get them to pass.
Director, I
so
was
does the problem lie within the accountability of the instructor or within the accountability of the person taking the test? And then also, I'd like to know what the fail rates are currently for HMA and HMO. And then I'd like to know what they are in 6 months. And I think you're going to be wrong. And I may be wrong. And if I am, I will say it in a meeting. I'm wrong. But you're fixing to see the rates skyrocket even worse than what they are now. Additionally, do you have data showing the most highly failed sections of each one of those exams
After our last
as they're
meeting,
written now?
Ms. Laura sent to me at least pass fail rates. Ms. Laura, do you have that available readily?
well,
I do. I can send it to you all right now.
yeah, I'd
This
ask for
is
that.
as of 3/13.
I've been tracking this. If we go back to our meeting at TFACA, this was brought up and we were discussing it. And that's when we started seeing the spike in the high failure rate of HMA. HMA used to have a very good pass rate. And I couldn't understand why all of a sudden we started seeing this high spike until I got out talking to people. And this is the exact reason. The test has changed. It's no longer testing the ERG, it's testing what's in the book. I do think in 6 months we will see a better test rate because the word will get out. You cannot just use the ERG. For 20 something years, as far as I can remember in my career, this has been part of the testing. Once word gets out, I think we'll see better pass rates. But I've been studying it, and this is what the reason is, I believe.
So if
Commissioner
we're going to do
Green,
this, I'd like to see what the numbers are now, and I'd like to see what the numbers are in 6 months. I
yep,
personally myself, when I teach HMA and I teach HMO, we teach directly what the book has, and my people study, and my people are still struggling at the current rate now. And so if the numbers continue to rise, then we're going to have to go back and we're going to have to reevaluate every single test that we have written and make sure that it's written the correct way. Grammar and punctuality in our tests is terrible and rampant. That kind of goes back to the whole dictionary thing. There's problems throughout our tests and have always been there, and we've tried to get them fixed in the past, and they're still terrible.
yeah, so Commissioner
I
Green,
still disagree with the ERG, and I disagree with the dictionary, and that's just my stated opinion.
Commissioner Green, I respect that opinion, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And what I will tell you is that we'll absolutely provide those numbers. And if I'm wrong, I'll sit here and admit that I was wrong as well. That's mutual. What I will also say is that every test that is challenged by a firefighter comes to me for review. And I can tell you, we had a question the other day that was challenged on a wildland test that came to me. And while it wasn't wrong, I felt that the test question wasn't written fair enough. And Laura can tell you that I told her, hey, I want to rewrite that question. And I understand the impact that has. When we rewrite one question, we have to end up printing off multiple copies to send out to our proctors and update our entire written test bank, right? I understand the impact that it has, but we owe that to our firefighters. And I think we can all probably agree on that aspect of it. And we will continue to do that. I can't speak for how the tests were written before. I can only talk about what we're doing moving forward. And I can promise you that we're making a concerted effort to develop and produce better tests that have fair questions that aren't loaded with grammar and punctuational errors and all that, right? And I don't want test questions that require somebody to have to go pull out a thesaurus or a dictionary. I get it, right? But at some point, like we have to change the culture, and I think like this is a culture change. And while we can disagree, and I respect the opinions of the commission, um, unless the commission is just wants to force my hand on this, I believe this is what's in the best interest when it comes to maintaining an accredited certification process that is of high standards.
One,
I may,
go ahead, Jay.
I have to agree with Brent and Corey on this. I mean, I've got several calls from probably some of the same people and others about this situation. And, you know, the only thing in the fire service throughout my career that book wise that was ever given to us as a reference in day-to-day operations. Take all the textbooks you want to take, you don't have them on the fire scene for day-to-day operations, is the ERG book. And that is our sole reference that of any books that we have that's just give to us from you might say day one, that lasts throughout our career in updating. And I just feel like that one, if the test now is completely out of Jones and Bartlett, I'm not saying the ERG wouldn't help them answer questions, because I think it will at some point, but it's not really an open book test because the test questions are not coming out of the ERG. And I think that we're taking that valuable time for that firefighter to be able to use that tool of resources that we're providing and they're provided with for the rest of their career. We're taking that away from them to use the knowledge that they learned during class, or they learned during a practical, if they use it during the practical, to show that they can use that tool. Because I think all of us can come to agreements in hazmat that it ain't like firefighting. We're not going to know everything. which it's, do you know where to go find it? And get the resources you need. And I think this is valuable. You know, I do think the ERG book is a valuable tool for the firefighters to use. Uh, Again, I'm like Commissioner Ham. I haven't seen the test, so I really can't speak to that. But again, if the test is not coming out of the ERG, I really don't see it being an open book test, because not that they can't get a reference out of it for an answer, but that's what we really want them to do. Thank you.
And one thing I'll say to what Chief just said there is, it's kind of like a paramedic. When a paramedic's in the back of the truck, he's got a field guide or a reference little pocketbook that he may keep and he may glance at when it comes to his drug or his calculation or something like that he may need, because there is so much stuff out there. If we are sole source like that with a test, that's just a reference tool that's there. And if people are failing tests just because they're relying on the HMA, that's on the department and the instructor themselves as well. But that's a valuable resource to have there for them when we're taking tests. That's just my personal opinion.
Commissioner Moore, Commissioner Green, I appreciate that. And I'll be honest with you, I believe you proved my point by your comments, because it is a resource. It is a resource. As a fire inspector, you are using NFPA codes or ICC codes or what have you every day. And are you expected to memorize NFPA 101? Are you expected to memorize NFPA 70? You can go out, talk to any wildland firefighter, and they'll tell you that they have an IRPG that they carry with them. This is essentially the ERG of wildland. Do we allow them to use that during testing? Those are reference guides, and they were designed to be referenced in the field, to be used in the field. And our certification process is developed to allow to test practical skills and cognitive skills. And we 100% encourage folks to use those reference guides during the practical skills. That's why we built them this way. That's what they're to be used for. And I'll tell you, I've never met a firefighter that knows everything. I've never met one. Firefighting has evolved over the years. It's not just putting the wet stuff on the red stuff anymore. It's very scientific now, right? We can all agree to that. And there's a lot to know. And you have folks that are experts, I would consider experts in certain areas. You have the hazmat gurus, you have the rescue gurus, you have your engine guy, right? These are tools to be used in the field because the industry recognizes that there's too much to know and to memorize. But we expect folks to know how to reference stuff. And that's what the practical skills portion is designed, is to teach folks and to encourage folks, almost mandate folks to use those references during the hands-on practical evaluation, because we expect them to use it in the real world on the fire ground. You know, I won't say any more on it. We can say and belabor the point, but that's the reason why. You know, I agree to disagree, but I respect everybody's opinion. I respect that there's a lot of experienced folks on the commission, a lot of experienced folks throughout the state that have asked the commission to proxy their voice, and I appreciate it, and I'm willing to always have that conversation. But I don't think we'll ever be in a position to where we can just make a decision that pleases everybody. And I can tell you, this is done to just uphold standards and to produce competent firefighters. And in 6 months, Commissioner Green, if I'm wrong, then I promise you that I'll relook at it.
And I'll do the same. I promise you, if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. But we'll just have to wait and see what the data shows.
Yeah, and when you see what the data is today, something else that was in the comments that I feel bad for a lot of people that are on this call, whether they're just observing or panelists. We've spent hundreds of hours verifying these tests. I'm struggling to believe that they're that poorly written, because these panels, and usually it's one of us that's with them, look at every question. And to see people attacking that there's a ton of grammatical and punctuation errors, I find hard to believe, because we've poured over every question at least 4 times in the last 5 years in validation processes. We look at each question. And again, I've not been brave enough to sit in one of those sessions, but I feel for those of us, or those of you that have, if the perception out there in the field is that these are terrible tests from the grammatical and punctuation standpoint. And again, I've not sat in there. I know Commissioner Henry has, Commissioner Scott, several of you, Commissioner Green, y'all have sat in these test validations.
We have, and I've made notes to these problems before, but it happens on a regular basis. I have firefighters come to my office. What did this mean? And it's just because of the either way it's worded, or it's a grammar error, or the words used out of context, and it happens more than you think it does. And I'm not just speaking for me; I'm speaking for other training officers that I talk to on a regular basis. When you look at these exams, those errors are there, and they may not be on these new ones that just got vetted and just got put back out. They may not be there. I haven't seen one of the newest versions out there, but this does happen on a regular basis.
Any other thoughts? We're 2 hours in. There's a lot of comments. I've gone down from the public side.
Commissioner Windrow, I think Laura put a sign up for anybody who wants to do their public comment at the end.
Okay.
Actually, that was the sign up for the newsletter, Maribeth.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, then Commissioner Windrow, you can just call for public comment whenever, and then the
I
regular
mean,
rules.
like I said, there's quite a few in the comments section. Of course, we answered some of them as we were going. There were several questions about abolishing or going to in-house practicals, so hopefully that cured itself.
Hey, Chairman, one question that I did see in the chat about us moving to the in-house practicals that we did, and this may be a question for the director, is how soon will that be implemented? Is that starting today, or will that start next Monday? I think that was some of the questions people put in the chat, just knowing when they need to start doing that.
Well, obviously that's going to be, I believe that's a rule update, but however, unless told otherwise, I'm comfortable with having it in the meetings, that we can transition to that as soon as possible. Obviously we just really, all we need to do is change the form and do some administrative change on our part with the CADIS. But the structure's already there, no issues with it, and we can get that as soon as possible.
And one thing, I know you'll do it, Director. I have that confidence. I know you'll take care of it, but we just need to make sure that the attestation form stuff, like we spoke about earlier, making sure that we either have a place on there for who's going to be the instructor and what their qualifications are, or either a place where they can upload their certification, or however you need it on your end of the office to be able to research that and make sure that they are qualified. So if there's somebody that's not, then you can revert back to them and say, hey, look, we're going to have to change something here for this to be approved. And I think that would be the biggest thing that we just need to make sure we get there. So that way, when our customers go to that page and they go to fill out that form, all that information is there for them.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, we'll make sure.
Will that same information be required when they request to host a course?
Is that question directed at me, or what's the question really? I'm not quite understanding what you're asking there, Commissioner Cobb.
I'm sorry. So when a department decides to start a class, they have to identify when, times that they're going to be teaching. Is there a requirement for them to put down who is teaching and what their qualifications are?
No, when it comes to teaching, they can use whoever, the department can use whoever they know is certified and qualified. What we as a commission worry about is the evaluation. Now, if you're talking about they're hosting an event that our folks are out proctoring, then there's no need for the 2-week notification because it's already implied that we've been notified because our folks are already there to begin with.
Okay, I was thinking about the work session we had at TFACA, and I think it was Greg was talking about that when departments were wanting to host a class, that they had to have permission on the curriculum that they were using, and they had to identify who the instructors were, and that they had the certifications qualified to teach. So maybe I misunderstood that.
No,
Yeah,
no.
so that,
What it was is he wanted to be able to, the office wanted to be able to track what career development courses were being taught, such as Officer 1, Officer 2. And that way there was verification that it was being used for the correct standard. Because there's so many departments, and I'm guilty as one. I have approvals going back 5, 6, 7 years to be able to teach like Officer 1, but the standards have changed. So it's up to myself as the department teaching this to teach to the most current standard. And so that's where Greg was going, was that these classes that are being taught locally in these departments are being taught to the correct standard.
yeah, and the course completion, remember that, the commission does have a role in, I guess, saying, hey, if you take this course, then that's a prerequisite for this certification, right? But now, instead of what we've traditionally done with these certifications, we've required folks to submit approval to us beforehand to do the certification in-house or what have you. I mean, now the commission has given them blanket approval to do that certification in-house. So,
And I'm kind
that's
of, I'm like that. Sorry, Bill. I was just going to say that's what Bill was talking about. Greg had talked about there was numerous departments who have approved programs, but several of them may be under the old standard. And at one time, we had talked about making everybody needing to resubmit their classes to make sure to get them approved where they are meeting that new
actually,
standard. And
yeah,
yeah,
and I was just about to say that in the last meeting, I actually made the motion starting in January of this coming year that anyone teaching a recruit class would need to, in each year, would need to go ahead and get that new approval. And that's to make sure that they're teaching it to the current standard.
yeah, the goal is for, we've all recognized the fact that there are departments out there with course approvals from 10 years ago, right? Let's just say for HMA. All right, I'll just use this as an example. Let's just say we gave them a course approval 10 years ago for that. How does the commission validate that as the NFPA edition changed, that course that you all approved and granted them to operate under your scope also transitioned to matching that new NFPA edition change?
Yeah, for
And that
instance,
was part of the discussion at the last commission meeting. We're starting with the basic course, but the goal was to, as NFPA editions change and as the rules get updated, that the commission would identify a period in which folks with existing course approvals would have to come back or submit back to the commission showing the correlations that match the new NFPA JPRs.
because if you think about it, 10 years ago, people were using IFSA for HMA. Today, we're using Jones and Bartlett. If they haven't updated their curriculums, they're automatically failing their firefighters at that point.
I can agree with all that. What I was really asking was, are we checking? Is there any checks and balances? Can a firefighter 2 teach a 64 class?
Well, remember, the 64 class is not a certification, right? And that is a state requirement.
Well,
So
hold on, let's stop. We have to change the culture. Let's stop calling it 64. It's the basic firefighter training.
basic firefighter training. Now, the statute does say that that basic firefighting training course is taught by TFACA or can be taught outside of TFACA if it meets the equivalency of the TFACA course. So that's where the commission, if a department wants to do the basic firefighting course in-house, then the commission evaluates that and they approve it. But when it comes to the prerequisites as an instructor, the way we do with certifications, that requirement is not so much there. That requirement is, all right, has a firefighter been through the basic firefighting course? But because it's not an accredited certification, you don't get into the instructor one requirements and what so have you. But one of the things that and sorry to deviate here, but one of the things I want to get us back on track with is the public comments. If Chairman, if you want to continue forward with those.
Yeah, if someone else has an immediate comment, no guarantee we can answer today, but we will be meeting in Gatlinburg in a few weeks. So if there's something really essential, we can add it to the agenda then as well. Anybody out there have anything they want to bring before the commission today?
Mr. Chairman, the last thing in the box is a question. It doesn't say, looks like it's Greg from Savannah, but do you see it, sir?
It talks about how long is it good for. If I'm going to take over a year for a volunteer to pass. No, I don't think in the law there's any stipulation on. It just says they have to. It just has to attend the training in the TCA, the Tennessee Code Annotated.
No, but once a person starts testing, and I believe this is in rule, they have 1 year from the day
Right.
they start their testing process in order to complete
finish
it. And I can't remember
Yes,
if that
that's
was
right.
policy or if that was rule.
I'm pretty sure that's in the rule, and Director may correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's in the rule.
Yes. And where we've run into issue with kind of relevant to this question with the intro on basic firefighting is the requirement for live fire training. If folks do not get their live fire training done within, I believe, that 1 year, then I know TFACA will then require that member go through a refresher course before they do live fire training, because the gap, and this is designed around safety. This is a safety issue for TFACA that I agree with. They want to make sure that the folks that have had that large gap get a refresher on these safety items before they just allow them to do live fire training.
And the other part of Commissioner Scott's motion last month was the debate we had about is 64, again, I don't use hours, is the basic course covering enough JPRs to meet the minimum for firefighter one? I think we all agreed it did not. That was part of the reason for the resubmittal of their programs. Because again, we're not concerned about, we are concerned about the TCA, that they get the 16, the intro and the basic and then their live fire. But is there continued evolution towards certification, firefighter one?
No, David Doris had his hand raised.
All right.
David?
You go to lunch?
Oh, you know what? He may be muted though. Yeah, they're muted. That's why. Hold on. He's texting me. Yeah, he can't unmute.
And you and I can't unmute him.
Yeah. Laura, is there a way to unmute or no? You're trying? Is that what you said? Because you're muted. I had to lip read you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I got a Verizon phone to sell you then. One thing to address Greg's question from Savannah, and this goes along with some of the other topics you just had on when the standards change and instructors not updating. So the initial Commission 101 classes did not focus solely and 100% on education incentive pay like they do now. Years ago, we had updated training that was provided from the commission to training officers that would go over all of these updates, rules, and generic information. And now the 101 primarily, I haven't set one about a year, is nothing but education incentive pay. The other part, so that goes to the training of your new training officers as well. And every training officer is not part of the education incentive pay that does not reach out to coordinators and talk to them as much. The other part is, I think, Commissioner Windrow, one of your first meetings, I was at TFACA, somewhere around 17 or so, I can't remember. But in years past, when the standards changed, within the commission rules to inform us, it would have statements in the rules to let us know that, hey, we're switching to NFPA 1010 for firefighter 1 and 2 or whatever. And as of whatever effective date, your classes are no longer good unless you do an updated class. And that is what would prompt training officers to know they have to change to the new standard and resubmit their classes. That has not been done in a very long time when the rule changes and when NFPA standards change. You just voted last meeting here in Jackson on what books we're going to do for firefighter 1, 2, and all the apparatus. That information still hasn't been put out statewide. So a lot of it is information dissension. And Director, this is not directing at you. We that are involved understand the flow you have to take to put out statewide information. Your coordinators can only reach out to the ones they can get a hold of. We have changes now every week. The ERGs are gone. We're getting phone calls. I'm getting phone calls through the Farmers Association statewide to the far end of East Tennessee of, hey, how come my firefighters just showed up to a test and found out they couldn't use the ERG anymore? And that goes to the letter I sent, I believe the last one that our previous director was at when the HMA changes took place, and I'm glad we went to one book. It's very beneficial to, I think, every firefighter in the state, but nothing was put out statewide to say, hey, this test event is now different. And the reason it's been so heavily based the way it's been based for years is in Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken, TEMA is the authority having jurisdiction over hazmat response, and is mirrored off of their hazmat awareness class and their ops classes. Unfortunately, they don't teach out of these textbooks. So anyone who takes an awareness class through TEMA now statewide is never going to pass this test. And that's fine, but that information has never been shared. I've let my West Tennessee TEMA directors know that, hey, you need to let people know when you teach awareness, they're not going to pass this test. They've got to get this book and study these chapters.
So there was communication is always a problem. I mean, we know that in the smallest organization to the one that covers the whole state. There was a question asked about why HMO and HMA are before firefighter 1. That is I guess 1010 requirement now. It was a 1001 requirement. That's not a Tennessee Fire Commission requirement. That is the standard, and that's the accreditation standard. It's not something we did. That's the way it is. We don't have a choice. We couldn't even do that by rule, or we wouldn't be allowed to give a firefighter 1 certification. HMA, HMO have to come first.
I can answer that. I sit on the NFPA 1010 technical committee, and it's actually in the standard to be HMA and HMO for your firefighter 1 certification.
Any other questions from the audience? And again, we will be in session is it April? I've lost track. It's April, right? That we're in Gatlinburg?
May,
No,
first week in
beginning
May.
of May, first week of May.
May 5th.
First week of May. All right.
May
yeah.
5th will be a rules hearing.
Yes. All right. I'll entertain a
Yeah,
motion.
rules hearing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no other business today for the good of the commission. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground today in 2.5 hours.
I'll make a
make a
motion that we adjourn.
Second. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed to adjourning? Say so. All right. See you guys soon.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Do what, Mary Beth?
Looks like she left.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
You all too.
Watch the snow flurries.
Me too.